Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call our council meeting to order. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that we are all wearing masks. So if you speak, you're going to have to speak up. If you have a difficult time hearing me, let me know. It may be that I just have to remove my mask while I'm speaking, if that's all right. So if everyone will stand, we're going to have Councilman Perry lead us in prayer, and then we will follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, let us pray. Father God, we are truly grateful and thankful that you have allowed us to be present and to conduct our city business. Father, we pray that your presence will be with us tonight. Father, I pray for protection for the city, for the police, for the fire and public works, and as they are about protecting their citizens, taking care of their citizens. Father, I pray that you would keep them from all harm, hurt, as well as danger. And Father, we thank you, we praise you. Even in tough times like these, we understand and realize that you are still under control. And Father, we pray that we will not be resistant to change. Father, we pray that day in and day out, that you would be with us, continue to give us hope, continue to give us peace, continue to give us joy. And we realize and understand, as long as we keep our hands in you, that everything will be all right. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. James.
Yeah.
John. Here. 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 Here.
Okay, before we get started, there's we need to amend the agenda if we can. We need to add to the agenda discussion with the fire department fund or savings account and Verizon giving me permission to negotiate with Verizon, and we'll explain a little bit more than that when we get to that. But if we can get a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay. Your minutes, everybody should have a copy of the minutes. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes as written.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Tonight there will be no committee reports. There will be no citizens forum. There is no old business. And we will not have department head reports. I'm going to go ahead and remove my mask for a minute. However, even though we're not having department head reports, all department heads did send you their reports. Hopefully you had a chance to look at them. If you have a question, we will open the floor at the end of the meeting for you to ask department heads specific questions if you want. There is going to be a lot of discussion tonight, but the idea is for us to be able to get in and out as quickly as possible tonight. So I want to begin by saying thank you to our council members for adapting and doing this the way that we're having to do it tonight and wearing masks. We want to say thank you to the citizens who decided to watch at home and still keep up with business tonight and allow us to be able to conduct business and again be able to do it in a room that's not crowded so that we can adhere to those distancing rules and then be able to get out of here in a good amount of time. So let's go to new business, and we're going to begin tonight with Cristello Park. Now, Andy Dibble is not here. However, Andy, and I forgot your last name?
Anna.
Okay, Andy Hanna is present with McClellan. He is knowledgeable of the project. So if somebody does have a question for him, you can ask him. If we need to get Andy Dibble on the phone, we can call him on his cell phone and put him on speakerphone. In front of you, you have the bid tab that went out. As everybody knows, this project was held up. I held the project up because we had the bids go out, but there was no testing, no geo-grid, anything performed on the site. And I thought that was dangerous. I thought that could lead us down a road that could add another $100,000 to the project easily. And I didn't want to assume anything. I wanted to make sure that we had a good idea of what we were getting into before we started. We have the results of that test, which I believe you have and you've had a chance to look through. In summary, basically what we're saying is that if you approve the bids that have been put in front of us and who we are going to ask you to approve, the project, if we put it off until July or August, the ground should be dry enough that we shouldn't have any issues or any problems. And of course, as we get on through the summer, we'll have to make, we'll have to analyze it some more. We may have to make some more adjustments. But that is the goal at this point, is to start this project somewhere in July or August. Once it's started, we're talking about, I think, 8 to 12 weeks of completion time. So it ought to go pretty quick once we get it started. So on the testing that was performed, I emailed the basic overall project to everybody today, so you may not have seen it in your email yet, but it's not any different than what you should have already had. And then we also have the project manual over here. It's 200 pages. I did not print one for everyone. If somebody wants to look at it at some point in time, you can. I also emailed that to everyone. Are there any questions for Andy? Anyone have any questions? So on the bid doc that's in front of you, the bid tab, you'll see the different construction firms that placed bids. On the recommendation from McClellan, and after talking with the contractor from Cove Creek, they were the low bidder, and that is who we are going to ask you to approve. I believe Cove Creek was the company that did the solid surface at the Lake Alma trails, that loop. Is that correct, Andy? Yes. So we are familiar with their work, had no problems. We went back and researched it. We had no issues with them before.
So, Andy, you don't see any problem with their bid? They're considerably lower than some of the other bidders?
Me and the other one, we looked at it and we didn't seem to have a problem with it. No, sir.
These bids were based on quantities that the engineering firm presented, so the quantities that they bid on was equal across the board. So it wasn't them assuming that, you know, in other words, it wasn't a difference than one saying it was going to take this much, one saying it was going to take this much. That wasn't the difference. The difference in this is solely the price per quantity.
Okay. All right, so we need approval on this to get started?
We need a motion to accept the low bid, which is Cove Creek.
Okay, I make a motion that we accept the low bid from Cove Creek Construction Incorporated.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Pass. All right. One other note on Cristello Park. This week I sent in a letter to the state formally requesting an extension on that grant. This project was due to end in May, at the end of May, and so we have an extension that takes us through the end of the year now. So that was taken care of this week. All right, next on the agenda, this is ordinance 2020-2. This is an ordinance to establish a stipend for volunteer firefighters. A motion to bring this to the table.
So moved.
Second.
Vicky?
Yes.
Ed? Gary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Okay. This is now open for discussion.
Move to table ordinance 2020-2.
Do we have a second to table?
Reason given the budget situation, I think I'm not opposed to this.
Yeah.
Just timing, I think, is not appropriate.
I will say that there is nobody in this room that is any more supportive and appreciative of the fire department and the police department than maybe Jeff and Eddie and myself. And I think that with what you're about to see on our budget and what we are facing, that this may not be the time for this.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I think it needs to be done. Without a doubt, it needs to be done. I don't think now would be the time to do it.
I agree.
Yeah, it's making a difference, I agree, and I've already talked to my firefighters about it. It's not a problem with them. We appreciate the kind thought, and it's something we can definitely look at at a later date. I just don't think the timing right now is.
This is, these guys don't get paid enough as it is. And I talked to a couple also, and this is tough, but that we had support from the few that I talked to also. So we'll need a second on the table.
I'll second.
Sandra?
Yes.
All right, all in favor, we're going to call this.
Best practice always is on call.
It doesn't require a special majority. To second, to table, you vote to table?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry. James?
Yeah.
John?
Yes.
Gary?
At this time.
Ed?
Abstain.
And Vicky?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I do want to make a note and say thank you to Councilman Perry for bringing that ordinance and supporting that ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Perry. Next on the list is ordinance 2020-3. This is an ordinance for virtual meetings for the City Council and Planning Department. Need a motion to bring it to the table.
So moved.
Second.
Sandra?
Yes.
James?
Yeah.
John?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
And I got a little bit ahead of myself on the last one, so this one we'll do correct. I need a motion to read by, waive the 3 readings and read by title only.
So moved.
Second.
Vicky,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Jamie, I'm Sandy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 2020-3, an ordinance to permit virtual meetings for the City Council and Planning Commission and to pass an emergency clause. This is now open for discussion. And I will just give a quick overview of this in light of what we're going through with COVID-19. What this basically does is this gives us permission to get away from our normal procedures and be able to conduct city council meetings and city business in a virtual form. There are a couple of different platforms out there right now that that the Municipal League is saying will work. I will be. It would not be right for me not to tell you that, as far as I know, the state has not yet approved virtual meetings. There's legislation drafted, but it has not yet been passed. But Municipal League lawyers, and Sean and I have had some discussion on this also, that we believe that in light of the situation where we're at, in the safety and well-being of our citizens and our council members, and city employees, that it's the right thing to do at this point. So long as whatever platform we choose, we can provide citizens access, they can be a part of the meeting, and as Sean likes to say, they have to hear and be heard. And so long as we can meet all of those requirements, then we should be okay. So that's what this ordinance is. This is just giving us an okay temporarily to be able to conduct business on virtual platforms.
Move to adopt ordinance 2020-3.
Second.
Vicky,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
James,
Yeah.
Sandy.
Yes.
Ordinance passed. Oh, that's true. Sorry, there is an emergency clause attached to this. We need a motion to accept the emergency clause.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy,
Yes.
James,
Yeah.
John,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Vicky,
Yes.
6-0.
Next on the agenda, ordinance 2020-4. This is granting the mayor's office, granting myself temporary powers, and to pass an emergency clause. We need a motion to bring this to the table.
So moved.
Second.
Sandy,
Yes.
James,
Yeah.
John,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Vicky,
Yes.
Need a motion to waive the 3 readings and read by title only.
So moved.
Second.
Vicky,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Sandy.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2020-4. This is an ordinance to grant the mayor temporary extraordinary powers to provide for the safety and health of Alma inhabitants and to pass an emergency clause. This is now open for discussion. Again, I will give you kind of an overview of what we were looking at here. We had early on drafted a emergency clause in case we had to use it. And again, Mr. Brister and I, we believe that to this point, the facilities that I ordered closed, the playground areas that were ordered closed, that in light of the current emergency declaration from the governor, that we were in our right to do that, because we were, again, trying to make sure that our citizens were safe. So it's the safety and the welfare of our citizens. However, to just make sure that we have covered all of the bases, we're asking you to give me temporary authority over our municipal buildings, our parks, recreation areas, and our employees. And this is the other thing that's very important here. When we started adjusting everybody's hours and how we rotated them through their departments, did go away from our policy and procedures. Again, I still believe that we had the full right to do that. But again, it just would be nice for you as a city council to say, yes, we are supporting this. So this way, if something happens, and let's say that we end up with several guys in the water department sick and a water line breaks, well, what this does is this gives me authority to have somebody in the street department, or to have Jerry Parsons or Buddy Gray or whoever go help dig a ditch so that we can get that line. So we may be asking employees that work in one department to cross over and work in another department. And so this is another part of this ordinance.
What's the expiration trigger?
I've got a time limit in it. I believe it's the end of May.
May 29th.
May 29th.
Move to adopt ordinance 2020-4.
Second.
Sandra?
Yes.
James?
Yeah.
John?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
And I do want to take just a minute while we're on this subject to make sure that everybody is aware of what we've done. I know that I sent emails out. Basically, I carbon copied you when I would send direction to department heads. But we are staggering. We don't have any more office personnel in an office than one person at a time. Our street and water guys, only one per truck. We don't have two guys riding together in a truck. And we've been operating like that now for, I think, 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. We were the first to go that way. And and then those that are working at home, they are working, they're answering emails, they're doing what they can from home. They're just not in the office with us at the present time.
There's an emergency.
Oh, and we have an emergency clause with that one too. So Section 2, the emergency clause, the Alma City Council recognizes that Alma and its citizens are under dire threat from the COVID-19 pandemic, and that our citizens' health and safety require that this ordinance granting the mayor extraordinary temporary powers to protect our citizens constitutes an emergency such that this ordinance must and will go into full force and effect immediately upon passage and approval.
Move to adopt the emergency clause.
Second.
Sandra?
Yes.
James?
Yeah.
John?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Ed?
Yeah.
Vicky?
Yes.
Ed?
All right, we added the fire department fund, which will actually end up being part of our financial discussion. The Verizon, we'll talk about that in just a minute, because I want to get to Mark, because Andy's here, and so I'll let Mark discuss with you some changes that we're looking at with our streetscape project. Mr. Yardley, the floor is yours.
I placed an exhibit in front of you earlier with highlighted, and the area that we're discussing is the area that's bound in yellow highlight. And basically, this is the area within the, we'll take the mask off. within the railroad right-of-way. And the original project, the scope of the original project was that we were going to do no work within the railroad right-of-way. And there were various reasons for that. And I think there were some assumptions made on our part as well as the engineer's part about what the railroad would and would not allow us to do within the right-of-way. And just to make a long story short, the railroad came out to look at a storm drainage box that needed to be actually modified. And as a result, while they were out there, they were looking at the project a little more closely. They have not been involved in the project. They didn't even receive a copy of the plans because we weren't within their right-of-way. Well, while they were there, they observed what we were doing. They asked why we weren't extending the sidewalk across the railroad tracks. And of course, our immediate response is, you would let us do that? You know, and the assumption has been that they wouldn't have allowed that anyway. But it turns out that they will allow us to do that. As a matter of fact, they prefer that we do that. So the area in this highlighted area is all the additional work that would be done to connect each side of the railroad to the existing streetscape project. So this is something we didn't believe we could do, but now that it's been offered as an opportunity, we would like to take advantage of it. Of course, this comes with cost. The primary cost, if you see on the highlighted area, the two little pink round circles, those are the cross arms that actually block the flow of traffic at the railroad when a train is coming. And those cross arms are going to have to be relocated regardless of whether or not we do any additional work in the right-of-way. That was the other discovery, is while they were out there, they observed what we were doing with the sides of the road and sidewalks and such, and they said, you're basically going to have to move these arms in about 5 feet from where they currently are in order for them to be compliant. And they say, we have the option not to do that, but if we choose not to do that, we assume all liability for that crossing. So if there's ever an accident and someone says they didn't see the lights blinking because of some obstruction along the side of the road, we would become liable as a community. And so there's no options for us, as far as I'm concerned, about moving the arms. And half of the cost associated with the work done in this right-of-way would be the movement of those arms. And but the other things that are in green there would be just beautification things that would be added to the project. And it would allow the sidewalk to connect actually across the railroad track. And so you would have a safe and ADA compliant crossing if we're able to do this. So I bring this to your attention because we need to make a decision on this immediately if we're going to do it. The cost for this is the part that's killing us. And just to move those signal arms is $86,000. That's not something we would do, the railroad would do, and that's what they're telling us it's going to cost to relocate them. And then the additional cost would be for the construction of the improvements in the area, and that's $58,000. That's just at the current quantity pricing. And then, and this is the killer, an additional $30,000 potentially for a railroad flagger to be present at all times while we're working within that right-of-way. And that's something they require. We can do nothing about that. And so we're estimating about 20 days of actual time that we need to be working within that right-of-way, and that would cost us $30,000 for a flagger to be present. Now, it could be less than that if the contractor's able to work, quickly and maybe streamline the process a little bit. We could get it done a little bit quicker. So altogether, we're looking at additional cost of about $175,000 to create this connection across the railroad track. And I come to you tonight asking you to please consider that. I know it wasn't budgeted in this project, but it's certainly something that will make us happier in the long run with what the project presents to the public, and it'll be a much safer crossing as a result. So
Where will the funding come from?
we would just take it directly from the street fund, or we can take it from the existing bond issue that remains from the other projects, the other road reconstruction projects, the Forsgren project, basically. So, about those funds, currently in our street fund we have about $1,051,000, and then in the remaining street bond fund that hasn't been allocated is $906,000. So we've got nearly $2 million here in available funds, and I'm asking y'all to appropriate about $175,000 for this crossing. So
The total of the crossing, the way 175?
$175,000. And those are estimates. I mean, obviously, the quantities will play out as they complete the work, but that's the best estimate from the engineer on what it would cost.
But that would come from that $2 billion roughly that you have.
Yeah, from existing funds, yeah. So, and I know this is a surprise and short notice, but it's something that if we're going to take advantage of it, we need to do that now.
Move to appropriate the funds.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, well, I appreciate your consideration. I think we'll be very pleased with the result. We just needed to have that conversation before I move forward with it. Thank you.
Well, Mark, as a fraction of the total streetscape project, what was the size of the project?
$3 million. Yeah. Yeah, it's a small amount compared to that.
All right, we'll move on. And let me also say that this was kind of sprung on to you because of us canceling last month's city council meeting. And this has been something that we've been discussing for a little while now. And but we still thought that it was the right thing to do to cancel last month's meeting. I thought that it was important for some things to play out and us to get some clarity on some things before we jumped out there and did something. So thank you for being accommodating to that. So let's start with well, before we get into financial, let me talk about Verizon. Let's go ahead and get that taken care of. So where we're at is Verizon went to our planning commission and asked for a variance so that they could put a single pole tower in the vicinity of the downtown area so that they could improve their network in Alma, specifically the southern part of town. And the idea is that they're trying to begin the infrastructure so that when 49 starts being built, that they'll be able to just keep right on going, and they'll be expanding their network to cover I-49. The variance from the Planning Commission was denied. The reason, and Buddy, you'll have to correct me if I miss something here, but the basic reasoning behind denying it was that we do have specific reasons to grant variances, and if you don't match those, then the Planning Commission feels like they open a can of worms by allowing it for one and not somebody else. And specifically in this zoning ordinance, and when it talks about cell towers, it specifically says that a company should try to exhaust all avenues for co-locating. That's what we want them to do. Instead of having 100 cell towers everywhere around town, we want these guys to be on one tower if they can be. And during the planning commission meeting, they gave kind of a reasoning for not trying to co-locate on one tower, but they gave no explanation for another tower that they could have co-located on. And the second tower actually wasn't that far away. So it was denied. There's also maybe some questions about aesthetics, with where they're wanting to put it. And us putting all this money in the downtown area and having a cell tower going up right there at the entry, basically, of the downtown area. So what has happened now since then is they have filed lawsuit against us in federal court.
Let me explain to you, it wasn't just the location. They were asking for a variance. We have established a 500-foot setback from a residential structure. They were asking for that variance
Yes.
down to 460 feet for a residential structure. Now, residential structure was a parking at the Methodist Church.
Yes.
So that's the basis of why it was denied, was based on that setback. So I just want to make sure that you all understood that. The denial was, the variance request was reduction of the setback requirements to 460 feet instead of the 500.
So, using laws that are intended to help cellular companies with their infrastructure and what the objective is for the federal government, our state governments, to expand these networks and the importance on there. They have filed lawsuit in federal court. They have some standing. They just do. Word came to me that the residential structure that's in question here, they have already said that they plan on that moving, and it's not going to be there much longer. And this area that we're talking about is zoned commercial, not residential. Now, our ordinance does not make that distinction. Our ordinance simply says residential structure. Doesn't make any distinction with what it's zoned, what that area is zoned.
I just have a quick question, maybe Buddy, or either of you can answer. So I'm looking at this on the map, where I understand this proposed cell tower location to be. There are two vacant properties, one to the east and one to the north. So I guess I don't see how they're constrained unless they're only interested in working.
I think they had a deal with that landowner. I don't know if they had talked to the other landowners and weren't able to reach a deal, but
I was going to say, so they could shift 40 feet to the east or 40 feet to the north and be well within our zoning or ordinance.
Yes. So that's what we're asking you to do tonight, is to give me permission to negotiate with these guys and see if we can come to, if we can work something out, whether it's moving over to one of those other properties and getting involved in those negotiations, or I think I think they have a proposal for the current site also that they want us to look at. The thing is, it doesn't do us any good to spend any time looking at it if I don't have the authority to negotiate. Whatever we negotiate and we do, I will come back to the city council and we will discuss it. But that's what we're.
Any kind of final settlement.
Yes, yes. So at this point, all we're doing is asking your permission for myself, and of course I will make sure that Sean's included in these negotiations, so that we can work with these guys and see if we can work something out.
So moved.
So, have they made any, you said they had alternative things they want to talk about? Have they presented that to the planning commission?
No, they have not at this point, and they don't want to until they know that we might be on board with it.
So this, under our ordinance, the appeal from the planning commission denial is a lawsuit within 30 days in a court of jurisdiction. So I think that was contemplated it would be state court, but they pulled the trigger on federal court. There's what's called the Telecommunications Act, of whatever year it was, and it's basically the telecommunications lobby in Washington, D.C. got Congress to pass a law that says, hey, we don't want these little towns passing rules that hamper us and hamstring us. So that's how they got into court. There's an interesting legal argument that we can get to make to kind of get some leverage in that Verizon is the one that filed a lawsuit, but Verizon is not who petitioned the planning commission for a change. They had a acquisition company, I think it was CGI, is that the right name?
CMI, yeah.
CMI, they're actually the party that petitioned for the variance and were denied the variance. And I had a question as to whether CMI should have been the one that filed the lawsuit, not Verizon. The federal law says any aggrieved party can sue. There's a legal term of art called standing. You know, I can't sue you just because I want to sue you. I have to have a legal basis, and standing is one of those foundational keys to that. And so that's an interesting argument. But at any rate, everybody's better off if we can work out a settlement. So their lawyers have kind of reached out to me. asking for the possibility of settlement if they can make some slight modifications. At this point, they're following our ordinance. It would not go back to the planning commission. It would, the settlement of the lawsuit or deciding to go forward full tilt with litigation rests with y'all.
Yes.
And that's strictly because of this telecommunications act?
Both. It's actually a combination of your ordinance itself says that appeal from the planning commission is to court, which they've done, and then also the telecommunications act. So it's actually both things pointing in the same direction.
Let's still go back to, like I said, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 different vacant parcels that they could purchase or lease agreement with and be within 100 feet of where they're wanting to put it now, so it's like, why does it, why?
They may just reach a really cheap deal with that landowner. I know one of the allegations in their lawsuit is that they have reached a deal with a landowner who cooperates.
And I believe that that's all legitimate discussion that we need to have with them. And I think that in our best interest, I'm with Sean with this, I think that we need to try our best to talk and work this out without it going to court, because that will cost us money.
James made a motion.
So my recommendation is you at least attempt some negotiation.
Well, I've got a motion, y'all need a second.
Yeah, we need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right. And again, be mindful that whatever comes out of those negotiations will be brought to you. So you will still have final approval. All right, let's move to the finances. Again, I've tried to keep everybody abreast of what we were doing. I really fully intended on having some of this in front of you before tonight. I know when I was on the city council, I didn't like walking in and seeing this and trying to absorb it all and make a decision. The problem that I had with this was things were continuing to change. And just as an example, as I was getting ready to leave the office and come here tonight, about 6 o'clock, I received an email from the Municipal League talking about what we need to do now, because we believe that we're starting to get some deaf ears on some problems that municipalities are having. And in that email, I believe that they were talking about the street department on this particular paragraph, but state turnback for the road department. We're not talking about a decrease in actual collectible revenue. We're talking about what they've now said that they're going to decrease in state turnback, and they're going to decrease that by 15% of actual received revenue. Now, that does not really affect what we're going to talk about right now, because that's the street department. So again, before we start this discussion, I think this is important for you to be mindful of this, and I think that this is important for our citizens to understand this. When we were talking about the surplus of money that we have in the street department, that money is there. Our street department is fine, it's good, but that money cannot be spent on anything other than street projects. Our water department, our waterworks, is fine. We have a good reserve there. We do have an issue already with water bills not being paid. Last time Mark and I had a discussion, we were at about $10,000.
About 7,800 right now.
Okay, so $7,800 in unpaid water bills at this point, and we suspect that that's going to be even more before this is done.
5%.
Okay, so, but with that being said, our waterworks is fine. We're okay, and that money can't be used for anything other than our water department. So when we start talking about these numbers, the gist of this is that if we had budgeted projects, and let's just take for an example Costello Park, and I know Mardell wouldn't want to hear this, but if we had budgeted money out of the general fund to do that project, this would be a no-brainer. We could just say, you know what, it's going to be another year before we get that park done, and we're going to take that money and we're going to use it in the general fund. The problem is that, in one way it's a blessing, and another way it's a problem. Every project that we have working right now, sidewalks, Lake Alma Trails, Costello Park, downtown streetscape, every one of those projects is being paid for by grants and bonds. And that money can only be spent on those projects. If we halt them, it does us no good. So, with that being said, we start looking at the numbers that we're looking at on the projection. And I know that you had the original email that I sent out, the original snapshot that I gave you, and it's changed since then. Almost right off the bat, I reached out to, when I had sat down, did some calculations, put some numbers together, it concerned me. And my thought was that maybe somebody like Michael Packow, who is the state's chief economist and forecaster for the state, maybe, you know, he's a lot smarter than I am. Maybe he would look at these numbers and see something different than I saw. Unfortunately, our numbers were almost identical. And then he revised them last Friday. And so they're even lower than what we originally looked at. You see the graph that's in front of you. He actually did out on the left-hand column. That's actual money broken down. He showed what the sales for each month would be, and then beside that is the receipt month. Most generally, we don't see those revenues come in for a couple of months, so it's a little lag time. So for an example, if you're looking at the graph and where basically everything just falls off in April, we will start seeing those in our collections in June and July, is how that comes out. So as we start talking about our numbers and where we're at, I want you to be mindful of the first primary concern is getting us through the second quarter, because our second quarter is going to be dismal. It's going to be bad. The good news to this is that we sit here tonight in a lot better shape than we were this time last year. This time last year, we were having discussions because we were having a cash flow problem, and we were having a difficult time making payroll and some other issues. But because of what we did last year and how we spent our money, and because we ended up with some extra revenue, we're okay. A lot better shape than what we were last year. So looking at the numbers, in summary, this is kind of just an overview of what we have. If you look down on the bottom right of that forecast sheet, again, this is what I gave you is coming from Michael Packow, and which, by the way, I don't know if this is good or bad, but because I reached out to him, he actually used us as a model that they have put together now that they're going to be using through the municipal league for other mayors that might be looking for some guidance as well. So I thought that was good that we actually started that discussion with them and brought something to light that might be useful for some other mayors. Some cities actually have a financial guy on hand, but we don't. And most small municipalities don't. So it's nice to be able to have this kind of a resource provided to us. So the 2020 forecast. Keep in mind that the baseline to this is going to be 2019 revenue, actual revenue. The projection for 2020 is going to be that by the end of the year, we're going to be somewhere between 8 and 10% specifically for us. And this is very important to also know that this projection was specifically for Alma. This is not the region, this is not Crawford County, this is for Alma. Our projection is, 9.7 or 10%. Now, there's a little bit of an adjustment in there because most of his baseline standards are set by the state, which the state has been seeing a 3% growth. Over the same time period, we were only seeing a 1% growth. So from 2015 to 19, as the state was seeing 3%, we were only seeing a 1.5%. So this could end up being adjusted a little bit to end up being only about 5% or 6%. But we're going to have to look at this as a 10% adjustment in projections for revenue. And again, this could end up being revised even lower before this is over. We really don't know where this is going yet. So this is how it looks to us, and without breaking every single category down in your budget. And the other thing that I did for you tonight was you have the actual financial sheet that you always have for city council meetings, but I also went back and printed off our city proposed general fund budget, because in that budget we actually listed things out a little bit differently than what shows up in that Encode printing. And so I thought that that might be helpful as we are discussing numbers and looking at things. So using 2019 tax receipts as a baseline and then projected 10% decrease of those revenues. We're looking, so if you look at 2019's tax revenue was $1,630,369. The new 2020 tax revenue projection using Mr. Packow's numbers and his projections is $1,467,332. We budgeted in 2020 $1,678,898. That was our budgeted tax revenue. That's a difference of $211,566. That's a 212, using round numbers, that's a $212,000 deficit from what we budgeted. Then we have to look at other revenue streams. This again was what my original projections were when I was sitting down. At that point in time, I had spoke with a handful of business owners around to try to get a feel of what was really happening, looking at what we were doing with this community building, how it was shut down. We were having to refund money, where we were with the courts. We had projected $280,000 in court fines and fees, which was basically what we had last year. Court is closed. March receipts were 33% lower than what they were March of last year, and it's going to get worse. And after discussions with Chief Pointer, the judge, I think that it's a realistic expectation that we're going to be probably 50% of what we budgeted, if we're lucky, in the courts. So if that sounds true, that's $140,000 right there. So looking at all of our revenue streams, I think that we're going to probably be somewhere around 22, 23%, maybe even as high as 25% short of what our projected revenue was. What that ends up coming out to, and again, talking about round numbers, that's a total number of $372,000 is where we're short. So also in here, I wanted to show you what our resources are available, readily available to us. And before I get to these, I want to, and I'll probably say this more than once, it's important for you to know that as of today, us sitting here, there is no help coming our way. The only thing that has been afforded to us from the state or from the feds is direct COVID-19 cost, cleaning supplies, cleaning companies having to disinfect, mask, things of that nature. Nothing to cover lost revenue. not a dime. And the other's being directed through FEMA. Now, nothing wrong with that, but when we start talking about needing help with relief, we need timely help, and FEMA isn't necessarily timely. We still have mayors in our region that haven't been paid for approved expenses from the flood a year ago. So getting money from FEMA a year from now does not help us with what we're talking about right now. Okay? We as a municipality, we have to abide by the same laws and rules as all the private industry does. So if we have an employee that becomes positive with COVID-19, we have to make sure that they're still paid while they're off work. If they're having to care for a family member, they still have to be paid. We have to do everything that the private sector has to do. However, the private sector is getting support and help for that. There's the payroll protection plan. There's other things in the CARES Act that helps our private sector, and rightfully so. They need to be helped. But there is nothing for municipalities. We are exempt. We have nothing to this point. So looking at our readily available resources, we had budgeted for a truck this year in the planning department. We can take that out. The money that we have put back for the police car for the police department, we are not buying a police car. That's $50,000. Through the mayor's office and our parks department, we had budgeted to hire a part-time person to help Gordon through the summer. We're not going to hire that part-time person. There's some other expenditures that were in there. We think that we can shave off some operational costs out of the mayor's office. We can, I think, legitimately save about $30,000 there between the mayor's office and the parks department. Maybe more. The police budget. We had budgeted for a new police officer. We're not hiring a new police officer. And this goes back to, if you'll remember correctly, when I sent one of the first emails I sent out, we put a freeze. Again, as soon as this all started breaking, we put a freeze on any unnecessary spending. And then I asked department heads on necessary spending to please, I wanted them counting squares on toilet paper. We were doing everything we could to make sure that we were watching our spending. Okay? We're not hiring the police officer. There's some other money that was put back in the operations budget. Chief Pointer went back, looked at it, came back, said, Mayor, there's $40,000 in the new police officer. There's another $40,000. We've got $80,000 in the police department that we can shave. Salaries. This is what you don't know because I just did this today. Yesterday, Destiny spent all day putting together reports and numbers for me, so that we could have a good idea of what we could do for our employees, make sure that they're taken care of, make sure that they still have their health benefits, all those things that we need. We don't want any of our employees being stranded. We don't want to lose any of our employees. But we have now furloughed 7 city employees. What we have done, and your Wayne, Mr. Beck, we're not furloughing him, but we're cutting his hours. And there's a reason for that, and Wayne and I discussed it, and it's in his best interest to do it the way that we're doing it. So it's just better for him to take the reduction in hours and the pay cut. But for all the other employees that were affected, they are going to still be working limited hours, but they're going to have to apply for unemployment and get their benefits that way. We already had budgeted their health benefits. We're still going to pay their health benefits. I have been on the phone with Municipal League several times. We do not have to convert them to COBRA. We can keep them on the current benefits. As we bring them back to work, there's not going to be a waiting period, so long as that we make sure that Municipal League understands that this was a COVID-19 related departure, and then they're coming back. The only other 2 people that were not furloughed was Mr. Parsons.
personnel, or?
You can do an individual if it's citywide.
Yeah, and we're not going to discuss necessarily salaries. Now, if somebody has a specific question that they want to ask about somebody, then we'll need to go into executive session.
I would move to go into executive session, 'cause this is the first, obviously, I've heard of this, and I'd like to learn more about what positions
Okay.
were affected and who, so. I move to go into executive session. I'm sorry, Anderson.
All right, we're out of executive session. We had some people wanting to know what happened to the live stream. We had actually moved into executive session so we could discuss employee matters. No decisions were made. We were just discussing our employees. We made that.
Yeah. 8:20 went. I made the motion second at 8:20.
All right. So as we go back to discussions on our revenue and our budget, and I apologize because as I was reading this, I thought all of you had this sitting in front of you as well. Apparently, I left it sitting on the printer in the office. So I will make sure that I go slow enough that you can write these numbers down as we go. So where we are at, we'll go back. Total budget shortfall is $372,000. Then we go to readily available funds that we can come up with. We had $50,000 set aside to buy vehicles. We will not purchase those vehicles. We have another $30,000 that we can shave out of the mayor's office and the parks. For an example, again, we're talking about we had budgeted for a part-time employee we will not hire. There's some other cuts that we can make. I believe we can probably come up with more than $30,000, but that's a good number. The police budget, by not hiring the new police officer that we had budgeted for and other budget items, we've shaved $80,000 out of the police budget. And then today, I furloughed some employees, and by doing so, we were able to save another $30,000 over the next 4 weeks, or 16 weeks, 4 months. Now, I think that it's important, as we discussed in the executive session, that everybody know that every one of those employees I talked with, and every one of those employees was in agreement with what we were doing. We have full intention of keeping all of our employees. We don't want anybody to go. We have some really good employees, and we want to make sure that they are taken care of. And this does not affect employees of the street department or the water department, because those are two separate funds, and those are having no issues. That money can't be spent for anything other than those departments. So where we're basically at is, by the time we do that, if the numbers stay true, and I will tell you this, if you missed the governor's conference yesterday, his press conference, they said then that the state revenue was down 8% in the first quarter. It's projected to be down 16% in the second quarter. Now, that doesn't necessarily affect us directly because we're a little bit different, but that's what we're looking at. So I will go back to that graph that we were talking about, that you do have in front of you, and you'll see that dip, and trying to get through the second quarter is going to be pretty tough. And Mr. McGee, you had a question.
Yes. I tried to keep up with it on the news, but I don't see anything that's come up yet about helping the smaller cities.
Yeah, and that's correct.
And I was just wondering, had you heard of anything?
It's not hopeful at this point. So I'll go back to my opening statement with this is the way it's appearing to me is that they're going to try to direct this through FEMA, and that they might even give some latitude in lost revenue through FEMA. The problem that I have with that is that that's not timely. That's not timely relief. That doesn't help us over the next 3 or 4 months.
Do we have, does the city have any line of credit?
So that's a good question. That's something else. As I've been working on this, I have been in conversations with our bank, and we are working on that right now.
You know, like if FEMA could say, well, y'all are gonna get this, but you know, it'll be this, then we would know where we was at if we wanted to borrow some money.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we are working on that to make sure that we have a fallback if we need it. Again, we don't want checks to bounce, and we don't want to, we want to make sure our employees are paid.
Right.
Another question back on the duration of furloughs, you say that was for 16 weeks?
Yes, now not all, because for an example, one of our court clerks, once court goes back into session, she will have to come back. So she won't be gone the total 16 weeks.
Right. And so, God willing, things get back to normal eventually. Do you see furloughs extending into back to, for budget considerations?
Yeah.
Is there?
I think that it's definitely a possibility. I think that the numbers that we have in front of us right now are middle of the road projections. So I think by looking at the numbers that we have right now are really about what I think is going to happen. I'm hoping that we get closer to that 5% in tax revenue loss, and that we're only about 17 or 18% in total revenue. But with that being said, this could be revised and we could end up going the other direction pretty easily. And then I think some of that's going to be how well that we watch our expenses from here on out also, and where we are. There are certain expenses that we just can't do anything about. We still have to pay the light bills, the gas bills, and again, we're not afforded the same thing that individuals are. If we don't pay ours, they're going to shut our lights off. So
I don't know if it'll be long enough for it, but I know that we use a lot of gasoline for our automobiles and stuff.
Yeah.
And the price being there, it's got to adjust his budget a little bit to help him out there.
Yeah. And with some of the, like we have a department head that's going to be furloughed, so there's going to be some savings there, that we didn't account for in these numbers. And we didn't purposely, because that's our cushion, so to speak. It's minimal, but it still gives us a little breathing room in the big picture. We've been watching what we spend there. We haven't been doing a lot. We're not, as we were talking about before, we're not necessarily out looking for trouble at this point. Police officers are, they're patrolling, they're doing their jobs.
Right.
But outside of that, we're being pretty mindful of what we're spending with gas. And gas is cheaper. And I've asked the department heads to make sure that we keep our tanks topped off. So that way we can take advantage of the gas prices, and we don't want to be caught in a position to where all of a sudden there is a problem with the supply and us start running short. So that's where we are with those numbers that I just gave you. That's 190,000 from that 372 projected shortfall. So our other possible sources of revenue is we did start the year with a reserve of $130,000. So that's the good news, which was a lot better than where we were last year, because last year I think we were at 30,000, I think. Somewhere around in there. We have $100,000 in the savings account for the fire department. Before we go any further with that, again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. There is no one that is more supportive of our fire and our police than myself. And when I was first elected to the city council, one of the first things that I did as a council member, as you remember, was drafted and sponsored an ordinance that mandated that we take that 10% that we told taxpayers that we were going to use for the fire department, that we were going to take that money and put in an account for the fire department. And we did that as a city council at that time, because that money wasn't getting put over there and it was getting spent in other things, because the tax, and this is important, the tax language says public safety. The tax language does not break it out 40-10. But the citizens were told it would be 40-10. And so that was what our intent was. I have had a discussion with Chief Wakefield, Chief Wakefield. And, both of us are, I think, on the same page. And that is the last thing in the world that we want to do is to have to dip into a fund that took us a long time to try to get put back for the fire department. And so with that being said, and this is going to be part of this other motion to amend the agenda tonight, I think that it is likely that we may have to. And again, the tax language gives us that leeway that we can use that for public safety. So we can use the money that we have in the fire department to help cover salaries or whatever we need to do with our police department. So we don't have to furlough or lay any of our police officers off. Even though things are kind of quiet right now and everything's good, there's still that possibility that things could go south in a hurry. And I just think that the last thing in the world right now we need to be doing is laying off police officers. So, and we'll come back to that in a minute, but I wanted to just tell you that this is why we amended the agenda to put the possibly using those funds, giving me the leeway to use those funds. And then the only other revenue that we have readily available to us is the water park. And let me explain this. And this is another decision that you're going to have to make tonight. Or at least give me some good guidance on what you want to do. And this is why Destiny's here tonight. So the water park, we have 63,000 still in the bank on the water park. It's probably in your financials. I guess I could look. It's around $63,000 in the bank. It takes basically every bit of that to get the water park open and operate for 3 or 4 weeks before we start seeing revenue that starts coming back in. Is that pretty accurate? Somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000. If you'll remember correctly in your budget, we had the water park budgeted to lose $15,000. Now, we did the same thing last year. Destiny did a great job with the water park. We were able to take advantage of some laws, federal laws, when it comes to minimum wage, because of being a municipality and having some younger people work for us. That helped us. And then again, between her and Mike, watching their expenses, we did a great job. We all know we ended the year, we actually had $6,000, $7,000 left over, which was great. If we can have the park open and provide a service and it break even, okay. But here's what we're faced with water park this year. As of today, we can't open the water park. Okay, we don't have an okay from the health department to open the water park. They won't give us a time frame. The stock answer is that the virus will dictate the timelines here. But what I can tell you is the new timelines that are out is they're saying now that they don't expect the peak in Arkansas to be until May 2nd-ish. And then that also moves the end of this outbreak, meaning that there's no or very minimal infection rate till the end of June. So using, and again, conversations that I'm having with people that are knowledgeable of the situation and are afforded to information that I am not and the general public isn't. I think that it's reasonable to expect that the water park will be allowed to open, but we will not get it open Memorial Day weekend. That it's probably going to be somewhere in July before we're given the okay to open the water park. That's provided that as they start to turn the valves back open and we start to migrate back to some sort of normalcy, that there's not an outbreak. Because if there is, then that's all out the window, because they'll start shutting things back down.
Go ahead.
If we open in July, When do we close?
Well, whenever school goes back in.
All right, so we're talking about maybe 5 to 6 weeks,
Exactly.
and it's gonna cost us how much to open it?
Well, to open it and operate it for the first 3 or 4 weeks, somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000. And on a normal year, it takes us basically all season to get that back to where we're breaking even. So what I'm going to say is exactly what you just asked, and you know what that means to us. That means that if we are able to open the 1st of July, we're talking probably 6 weeks of operations. And I don't see how we operate the park for 6 weeks and make money.
And then recoup our investment to open it.
I think that it is almost a given. And Destiny, do you, I know we've had those discussions. You know, what do you think if we had 6 weeks? Do you think there's any way that we could actually operate the water park in full? Because we've had other discussions about the water park, but in full, and still be able to break even.
No. And you guys know that I love the water park. I would do anything that I could to make sure that it's open and functioning. I don't see, there's many reasons why, but I don't see that we would be able to actually, it worries me to try and break even in that amount of time.
You don't think we could recoup what we have invested when we start, if we start that late?
No, I know that we can't let our pumps and such sit either. We would have to put some water in there, run them every once in a while. We don't want them to sit and lock up on us, that sort of thing. So, you know, we might talk about things along that scenario as well. But have you seen numbers before? Do you think there's more? Is there something I'm missing? Because I don't know.
So my biggest concern is obviously everything you've mentioned, but even if the park was allowed to reopen on July 1, we're not guaranteed that patrons will want to come to the water park. I wouldn't know how to be hesitant to take my family.
Yeah, that's the other part.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, so we were looking at, you know, and we looked at last year, and we had a bad road, and there was a lot of things that went against us last year, but we were still okay. There's expenses this year that are going to be higher, employees and salaries, that because we're not going to be able to take advantage of the same things that we did last year. So salaries are going up. We can't control that. The new minimum wage laws in the state, they're going to go up. So we were already looking at having to probably increase our rates at the water park to cover those expenses. And so we're talking about, you know, having to increase rates already. If we're having a shortened season, how do we do season passes? You know, there's just so many different variables in this. And you know, this has been the hardest part about this whole COVID-19 thing, that there are so many variables that are at play here, and then there's so many different scenarios for each variable. So trying to figure out and get a handle on what you can really expect and what we think we can see.
Sure.
And I know Buddy and I've had lots of discussions about the water park. Destiny and I have had lots of discussions about the water park. I just, unfortunately, I don't see how we operate the water park this year and break even. I don't see it happening. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to opening the water park. I think that that it's worth reaching out to the A&P and asking them to make a commitment to cover whatever the expenses are this year with the water park, and see what they say. You know, they may be willing, they may not be willing. I don't know. I haven't done that yet. Because there is a part of me that says, you know, with everything that's been going on, it'd be kind of nice to have the water park open for those that want to take their kids out and enjoy the kiddie pool and the wave pool.
But he, you know, he brought up a good point. I think, you know, a lot of families might be hesitant to use it there for a couple, 5 to 6 weeks.
And you may be correct.
But
You know-
but there's other families that depend on it to be there.
And so here's how I looked at that. Let's go back to playground equipment for just a minute. I would have thought the same thing with playground equipment. I would have thought if I had kids still that age, that probably the last thing I'm going to be doing is taking them to the park and playing on playground equipment, taking a chance. But we had to close the playground equipment because we drove by here one day and it was packed. I mean, it was full. So we had no choice but to close the playground equipment. So, and as you know, if you've driven by at any time, our trails are still open and there's people on our trails fishing here. There's a lot of people that are coming out and doing stuff outdoors. So there is a part of me that believes that the water park, that there are a lot of people that may end up using the water park. For us to be able to break even, it would have to be a large number of people every day. And that's where the question comes in.
So maybe, obviously, this is a fluid situation. Is this something we can look at maybe month to month or week to week and see how things are going? And do we have to decide tonight that, we're...
You don't necessarily have to decide tonight. I am wanting to kind of get at least a feel of where everyone is, and the reason being, to answer your question, is that if we are going to open, the prep work to open the park we can't do in a week's time. So if we came back, for an example, let's just say that they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and release everything and we can open in June. Well, we're not going to be able to come back in May at a city council meeting and say, go ahead and open the park and be open in June. Now, we could do that in May and open in July, but it's going to take us 3 or 4 weeks to get the park ready to open. And so with that being said, if this council is going to lean in not opening the park, then we don't want to start spending the money to do that work if that's where this council is leaning. So that's why I was wanting to try to get a little bit of guidance with the water park.
Would
you
June be too late for us to make that decision?
Yes,
It would be.
yes.
Okay, so,
June. In the
okay, so
June
what
city
about
council
May?
meeting.
What about May, Mayor? What about next month?
Yeah,
So
right? You need 4 weeks, right, Destiny? Right? That's what we're talking about, 4 weeks?
Yes, and usually we have community service workers that help us.
We don't have any.
Because the courts aren't in session.
Yeah.
Well, and we have,
We're going to push 4 weeks.
yeah, and I just think, in light of having general fund workers on furlough, it's not the good time to try to open a water park, I guess, in my mind.
I think I agree with him.
The only thing I'm afraid of, if I may, is that we spend all this money and then they shut us down because
Yeah.
we have an outbreak. That's the only thing, and we won't recover from that financially. So I'm trying to look at the long picture instead of just the short one, because what will we do next year?
Yep.
And he's already paying $86,000 a year for a bond for the water park that, was established many years ago. So, I'm sure they would help us some, but I don't know how much they would help us, considering they already have that large payment.
So I'd move to suspend the opening of the water park indefinitely at this time.
Okay.
I'll second that.
And that was the direction that I was needing. So with that being said, there's $65,000 there in the water park. So now here's the other scenario of that. That's money that we don't need to dip into unless we absolutely have to. The $15,000 is no brainer. That just came off the budget, so that's good. That $50,000, if we have to dip in and use that, we can, but we're going to have to make it up next year, or we don't open the park next year either. So, this is why I'm saying that, with these readily available sources and then these other optional sources that we have here, altogether, that's another 65, that's 165, that's another $295,000. that we have that we might be able to use. And that, with what the other cuts are that we've already made, will cover us. But that would be using every dime of the reserve that we already have, all of the money that we had put back for the water park, and all of the money that we had in the account for the fire department. That would leave us dry. We have no more money after that. So, what I'm saying is, I wanted you to have a picture of where we were, what we've done, why we've done what we've done to this point. Know that we are continuing to work on all of the different scenarios that we may be dealt. As Judge Gilstrap likes to say, we have to play the cards that we're dealt, and we're just trying to make sure that we're ready to play whatever cards those are. And to do this in a way that we don't have to cost somebody their job, that's the last thing in the world that we want to do. We are really blessed with some really good employees.
That's right.
And
we want to keep all the jobs we have.
That's exactly right. And as we talked about in executive session, as one of the plans for the mayor's office in personnel is not figured into this either. There's going to be some other savings in there as we get towards the end of the year that's not in these numbers. Now, it's not going to be $100,000 worth, but there will be some other savings in there.
And then we might have something come out of some other place else with some money.
Well, and that's the hope. The hope is that that the federal government, the state government, Governor Hutchinson, to this point, I've got to tell you that I think that he's done a good job. He is not buckled and give in to national interest. He's tried to keep Arkansas's interest in sight, in mind. I think he's done a great job with it. And he has empowered the municipalities to do what we need to do to protect our citizens. We need our legislature, and we need our United States congressmen and our senators to understand that we have a lot of small municipalities that are about to be in a lot of trouble if they don't offer some aid. Even during this meeting tonight, I told you I made reference to the Municipal League email that I received right before I came over here, and I've had two mayors text me saying we need to get our guys together and we need to talk about this. It's vitally important to us that we get some assistance somewhere, that we get some help.
But we do have a plan.
We have a plan.
I mean, we might end up broke, but 90% of farmers I know work with that every year.
Right, yeah. We do have a plan. And I want to take this chance too to say this. One thing that's been really nice through this entire project, or crisis I should say, is the support that we have received from citizens. The different messages that we've received, emails, text, even down to our dumpster day. We had 3 dumpsters. If you don't know what happened, we had 3 dumpsters out there last Saturday, and they were full within an hour. And so we had a bunch of people that loaded up trailers and their trucks and didn't have any place to put their stuff. So we talked to the guys over at River Valley. We did an extension of the dumpster day, and it was held today. And they brought us 2 more dumpsters out, and we were able to do it again. And unfortunately, again, they filled up within about an hour, I think it was, maybe a little longer than an hour today.
30 minutes.
Okay. So, nobody, I'm saying this and somebody's going to see it on YouTube now, and so I'll probably get ripped, but nobody ripped us. Everybody was really understanding about it. They get it. But because of this, I also want the council to know, and I want our citizens to know, that we are now in talks with our sanitation provider, and we're going to see how we can figure out how to make this work and it not cost the city a fortune, and we can accommodate our citizens at the same time and make sure that if somebody's going to spend time cleaning up their property and getting some stuff loaded up, that when they get there, they're going to be able to unload it and have a place for it. Because it's only helpful to us. That trash and junk is going to go somewhere. And we would rather it be at the landfill and not on the side of the road somewhere. So we're working on that. So,
You got a motion, I got a first and a second on the, John made a motion to close the park. Did you say indefinitely or is it for this year? John for the park, and then James seconded it. So what is exactly your motion?
At this time.
Suspend indefinitely, I believe.
Suspend indefinitely. You got a second? Do we have it all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
sorry. All right, so with all that being said, this goes back to what I'm going to ask for. And we'll leave it to Sean to give the exact wording on this. But basically what I'm asking you to do is to give me some leeway with the funds that we have set back for the fire department in the savings account. So that if we need to dip into it, I have access to those funds. And the reason that we're asking for it now is so that we don't get into a situation to where all of a sudden we need it and we can't get everybody together to get the okay. Just know that this is a last resort, and this is just giving us the leeway, and what we're going to put a time frame on this also.
It's whatever you move. So I think the way the tax is worded, you can appropriate that money to public safety as necessary, and then if you want to put a time on it, you can.
So,
Do you have a time limit?
Yeah, let's put a time limit on it. And we're going to have to extend this one past May, because what we're concerned with is second quarter, which is going to get us into actually like June and July.
well, what the end of the quarter would be, May would.
Yes, but we're not, so it's what we're concerned with is the second quarter receipts that are down, and they lag 2 months behind. So where we're concerned is June and July. That's where we're concerned, having the revenue.
So, this motion will be good through the last of July.
I would say July, yes. Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Show me the same.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's where we are. Know that as we go through these finances, as we are continuing to deal with this COVID-19 crisis, our employees, our citizens, that we are trying to make sure that we are prepared, and I believe that we are. I think we're pretty well suited for just about anything that might get thrown at us to this point. Our employees, I have to tell you, have been absolutely outstanding. Really, really good. We've been working skeleton crews, and yet they've been able to keep things going. We're not really behind on anything. Be mindful that with Gordon being the only guy in parks now, that grass may get a little tall in some areas before he gets to it, especially if it's raining and he can't mow that day. But as of right now, we're not hiring a part-time employee, and we have no community service workers because all of that's been suspended. Okay. With that being said, what I want to do at this point is, since we did not have department head reports, I want to make sure that if anybody has a question for a department head, they can ask. If you have a question for me over anything that we went over, you can ask. Anyone? Everyone good?
I just had one comment. I know, we're working in a remote location this evening, and big thanks to Anderson Terry.
Yeah.
The production value of this is incredible. I'm watching it on my screen. Thanks, Anderson.
And thank you for bringing that up. So everybody will know too, I called Anderson when we were putting in the equipment in City Hall so that we could start streaming and recording and doing all the things that we wanted to do for our city council meetings, A&P meetings, and planning commission. Anderson came over, gave some good advice, pointed us in the right direction, looked at the equipment to make sure what we were getting was good, set up our YouTube channel and account for us. So Anderson has been a huge asset to us, and I want to echo what Mr. Ware said. Thank you very much, Anderson. All right. No other questions? Everything good? Right? Okay. We need a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor? Any opposed?
We are adjourned.